Use the second way to get in.
I call to order the regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission, Monday, September 9th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Mount Pleasant City Commission recognizes the Anishinaabe, whose ancestral lands the city stands upon today. We acknowledge the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe and recognize that the three bands of Ojibwe, Saginaw, Black River, and Swan Creek, have resided on this land for over 200 years. Our acknowledgement of the full history of the tribe and our commitment to be good stewards of these ancestral lands are an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those ancestors who came before us. We give thanks to the generous care with which the Anishinaabe, those members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan have given and continue to give to this land and our community. Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Bush?
Here.
Commissioner Chapman?
Here.
Commissioner Ake?
Here.
Commissioner Rollins?
Here.
Commissioner Wingard?
Here.
Vice Mayor Alsager?
Here.
Mayor Perschbacher?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Since we have a quorum, we will continue our meeting. Our first item on the agenda is a presentation by Jim McBride from the Middle Michigan Development Corporation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be here. You should all have a copy of our 2023 annual report. I'm going to have you look at certain pages and we'll go through it together if that's all right. If you go to page 3, these are the top line scores for 2023 that we rate ourselves on. And in 2023, we had 171 company visits, 309 company assists. Now, the reason there are more is because we might be calling on a company and they'll need us for more than one thing. So we'll count that as a separate assist. That's why that's a higher number. The companies that we call on invested over $57 million last year. Net new jobs are 577, and site submissions were 55. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward, but we're submitting sites for consideration to companies through site selectors that would be looking at our area for a company location. On the next page, you've got our mission and vision statement and our 2022 to 2024 strategic plan. That means that Aaron will be working with me on our next strategic plan that we'll be doing before the end of the year for the next 3 years. But if you go to page 5, this is our approach to economic growth. We look at it kind of as a four-legged stool. A lot of people think that our main focus is business attraction. Well, that is one of the things we do focus on, but retention and business expansion is of what we currently have is really the more important thing to do, because we have companies that are always looking for the best deal. We have other states that we compete with, and all kinds of generous offers coming from states like Texas and North Carolina to move companies that are located here to their state. And so retention is a big thing, and calling on our companies, making sure that they feel wanted and that they feel appreciated and that we try to solve problems for them. That's part of retention. And then expansion too. So when I first started here, and I think you've heard me tell this story before, but in 2015, after 12 years at the MEDC in Lansing, Bandit Industries was maybe just a little over 300 employees. Well, they're pushing toward 800 employees these days. So that's a huge expansion of employees and through growth. And I think it's great when we have local companies that grow like that. And then I mentioned attraction. That's where we do try to bring companies in. Talent or workforce development has increasingly become part of what we focus on. Our signature event is Coming Home, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then community development. And not all economic development organizations do community development. Sometimes they leave it up to their municipalities. We work closely with Michelle Sponseller, and we try to make sure that when we're going for grant submissions, especially with the Match on Main program, that we submit the very best applications that we can. So we'll work with Michelle, we work with the companies, and we submit them. We have a very high win ratio as a result, because we take that extra step, and then we are the submitters, not the company. We submit on behalf of the company, and then we carry them all the way through to that grant, and that's usually a $25,000 grant for a small business. I'm going to mostly, we have pages in here, since we currently cover 4 counties. I'm going to skip covering Gladwin and Clare and Osceola County. We'll just focus on Mount Pleasant and Isabella County. But I do want to tell the story of Cow Pleasant Dairy on page 6. This is a family from the Netherlands, and they bought this farm, and they have about 3,400 head of cattle for milking right now. They produce very high quality milk, but because they weren't entirely familiar with the American system, their agency was asking them to ship the milk all the way down to Indianapolis, and there were spoilage issues and so on. So what we were able to do was work with them, and now they deliver all of their milk to Yoplait Yogurt in Reed City. So it's just an hour away. That's a tremendous improvement over having to drive down to Indianapolis, as you can understand. They're putting solar up on top of their roof to be energy conscious. And in terms of the family, so several of the kids have already gone through Michigan State and graduated, and they are going to stay in the family farm. So this is a great success story in terms of keeping our young people here, and you can see the whole family there. All right, let's skip over to page 9. And this is, I mentioned I would talk a little bit more about site selectors. Last year, Katie Mora, who's my vice president, and I met with 52 different site selectors, and there's really only about a little over 200 of them in the United States, so we do go back and see some of the same people over and over again. I went to Greenville, South Carolina, and Katie went to Chicago with the MEDC. So we go with the MEDC, and you have to be selected. So they only pick 10 local partners out of all of the counties and cities in the state. Only 10 are selected. We're always the go-to one for rural Michigan that they pick. And so we try to go to all of these if we can. It's usually a one-day deal. So you fly in and then you are there one night, and there's just nonstop meeting with site selectors individually and as a group to promote the state, but also to promote our area. And so we've gotten some really good leads from these meetings. And this year, I've already been to the New York Blitz. That was a few weeks ago. And Katie is going to be going back to Chicago again. So again, we're going to be hitting 2 of them this year. There's on page 10, a little bit more about Bandit Industries expansion and their purchase of Birch Tank location in Union Township so that they can have more of a Mount Pleasant area location to show their equipment and kind of a showroom, and also easier place for people to get to. Okay, let's look at, skip over to page 14. And this was a case where $2.2 million for the, we worked with the city and in terms of the expansion park that is right downtown here, with the 18 additional parking spaces. I think it's 19 though, isn't it? I think it actually was turned into 19 parking spaces, and the electrical charging stations, we were helpful on that. It's wonderful, you guys. I'm sure you all agree. You know, when I first saw it go in, I was having a hard time seeing how much bigger it actually was, but when you drive by on a certain way, you can see, oh, this is way bigger than the last park was, and yet there's more parking. This is a great project, and this is the kind of thing that we really enjoy doing and partnering with you guys on. And then if you go over to, let's skip over to page 20. We had worked with the state of Michigan. They had some excess funding through HUD, Housing Urban Development. It was based on COVID relief and ARPA funds, and so there was just more money at that particular time than they had a way to distribute. So one of the options was to do job training through the funds. So we signed up, Oakland County signed up, Invest UP for the Upper Peninsula signed up. There were 3 of us who did it. It was a very difficult process because one of the things that they were looking for, they wanted us to work with companies, not individuals, and to train groups of employees at those companies for, raising their skill level and so on. And so we did work through companies, but what we found was that we would get about 80% or more of the employees were going to be above that low to moderate income level. But we were required, since this was housing money, this had to be 51% low to moderate income. And so we, not only that, but we also had to prove to the feds that they were, the lower income level. So we had to have a copy of their W-2, their 1040, and a copy of their driver's license for them to participate in this program. Well, you can imagine how popular that was. So we worked it. We had great employees. You can see some of the companies down here below: Isabella Bank and Isabella Community Credit Union, Meyer, and Bandit Industries, Bill's Custom Fabs in the South Industrial Park, and others from the area here. Mid-Michigan Industries participated in this training program. But it was really tough, and what we were able to do was get all those things and worked with Michigan Works, Great Lakes Bay, and we were able over time to get that number up. The reason for the photo there, as I talked about this program, is we were taking housing money and Frankensteining it into a job training program. The young Frankenstein kind of fit. So, but this is the kind of thing we learn a lot when we go through a thing like this. It was very difficult for us to do it, but we had a great success, and we ended up with 53% low to moderate income. The feds wanted us to train 200 people. We trained 240. So we hit all of our marks and then some, and provided some really good training for the people here locally. Page 21, I know many of you know Katie Mora, but she has taken the lead role for a Region 5 childcare initiative, and she actually was recently awarded by the combined chambers for Mount Pleasant Chamber, Saginaw Bay, Midland, and the other chambers in Region 5, honored her for this work that she did, focusing on the need for childcare in the area. Because what we're finding out is we're a childcare desert, and that, most parts of Region 5 are a childcare desert. That means that there are at least 3 kids for every position that's open, at least 3. So, there's a lot of kids that could get into childcare that aren't getting that, and as a result, one of the parents usually has to stay home and can't work, and so that really hurts our workforce. So that's why it's an economic development issue, because it's keeping people out of the workforce. And this is really something, it's somewhat of I think we've always had a shortage problem, but not to the degree that we do today. And as we went through the COVID pandemic, and we had many of these childcare centers shut down, they have not yet all reopened. We're trying to get more of them opened. We're trying to get more people to go into that. But what this initiative is really raising the awareness and getting our companies to understand that there's some great programs out there called TriShare, where the state will pick up a third of the cost, if the company will pick up a third of the cost, and the individual picks up a third of the cost. You share it 3 ways. And so we were able to really promote that and get more companies online so that they can understand the problem and try to help us solve it. And then on page 22, I mentioned Coming Home. So this gets bigger every year. 2019 was our very first Coming Home, and we learned a lot from that first one. We've been holding these since we were able to go back to live after the pandemic. We hold them at the Marriott Courtyard right by the university. We participate with Central, with Mid-Michigan College and Alma College, and we had 21 employers last year and 180 job seekers that are mostly seniors getting ready to graduate from one of those institutions, connect with those employers, and a lot of them were hired. And this gets bigger every year. 180 was the biggest we've ever had, job seekers, and this is coming up. in October. It'll be the day before CMU's homecoming, so we're right in the midst of promoting that again for this year, and we know it's going to be very big again. And a little good news, no, we didn't have anything to do with this, but Central Michigan has seen a little bit of an increase, and we're very happy about that. 24, page 24, want to just draw your attention to that middle article. Broadway Lofts wins National Jack Camp Excellence in Affordable and Workforce Housing. Congratulations to you guys on that. And, we all worked hard on that, worked together on that. I know there were other plans for that location. The city made the right call with, and partnering with the developer that we partnered with. That was a showplace. I remember hearing people comment, they'll never rent out all those market rate. No, the market rate apartments were rented out before the building was finished. It was the not market rate or the subsidized that didn't rent out all of them right away, but they eventually did. So, a lot of people in town had that exactly opposite of what really was going to happen. And it really showed us that we do need more of that market rate, quality apartments, not, we have plenty of student housing. We need that missing middle, which is, I know we all agree with that. So, kudos to the city for making the right call on that. But the award was, I think it's only two projects in all of 2023 that got that award. And then if you take a look at page 25, these are our sponsors and partners and our executive committee and our board, and Aaron's on the board. Enjoy working with him. And I always like to remind people, we don't get any money from the state. We do grant programs with the state, but we typically don't even get an admin, like all the work we do on Match on Main, we don't get an admin for that. It's just a service that we provide. So how are we funded? Well, we're funded through our sponsors and our partners, and our partners represent about 70% of our funding, and the city of Mount Pleasant is there. And then our sponsors, which are mostly companies, represents about 30% of our funding, and that's how we function. Without, we wouldn't do it without the generous support of the city of Mount Pleasant and others that are our partners and sponsors. So we really appreciate all of that help coming from you guys. And you can see we have a pretty diverse group here on our board, and some outstanding community leaders, with Jerome Schwind as our chair, Marita Haddam-Schiffman, who's president of My Michigan Health. Here, she's our vice chair, and so on. So, okay, I just wanted to kind of walk through that, give you an overview. And if there are any questions, Madam Chair.
Are there any questions?
I just have one, Jim. The first page that you directed us to
Yeah.
was page 3, and I know the numbers are impressive, but can you break it down into what is the Isabella County numbers?
Oh, yes, I didn't bring that. I apologize.
okay.
I'm sorry. I will make sure you have that at the next meeting.
Right, thank you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Kind of going off of that, actually, it was the company visits and company assists that you pointed out.
Yes.
171, so 309 company assists includes assists with multiple things for a single company.
Yes.
The company visits, 171, is that the number of companies that you've worked with, or is that the number of companies that you reached out to? Or does it include companies that reached out to you necessarily?
It would include that, but usually it's we that are the ones that set up the meetings. And in some cases, there might be a company for a variety of reasons that we'll call on more than once in a year. I think, one time it was 7 times for one company that we were working with, but working through some issues with the state, so it required 7 meetings in 1 year. That was 2 years ago. So that's in there too, but mostly these are one-time meetings per year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we just try to do, we do a lot of them in the fall, so we're hitting a lot of the Mount Pleasant ones in September, October, November.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I actually do have one.
Yes? Please speak into the microphone.
Others have to do this. Thank you for this comprehensive update feedback. Given the what you have right now, it looks wonderful. It looks optimistic, and I hope that it continues. But given what you've presented, what challenges do you foresee or envision in the future? What might be challenging for you, really?
What keeps me up at night?
Yes, what keeps you awake?
Well, I'll be honest, I've been a little concerned, with economists talking about a housing bubble and some other related things. I've been a little concerned about some sort of a turn down or some sort of, hate to use the R word, but recession. So I think that that's always the most challenging time for economic developers is when we go into a downturn. And the economy cycles, we know that, So we've had a pretty good run here for a number of years, and the economy's been pretty strong, but I think, as I've talked to the companies, they're a little skittish, they're still getting sales coming in and so on, so they're, or they might do the typical layoff at Christmas and hire everybody back the 1st of February. There's a lot of that goes on. But actually, I have been a little concerned about that, and those are macro things that, we can only do so much about locally. All we can really do is make sure that the companies that we have here know that we appreciate them and are working hard to keep them here, and that's often helped. One of the stories I like to tell, so when I first came in, take the 5 biggest companies in Isabella County. Out of the 5, 4 of them were bought and sold since I've been here in 2015. American Mitsuba, the one that's in the city, is the only one that hasn't been. So the other ones have all been bought and sold at least once, and one of them was twice. So, and I'm counting the ESOP, or the employee takeover, of one. So, that's a challenge, because when a company is bought and sold, bought out by a company in Texas or something like that, you worry that the production's going to be moved. And so one of the things that we always try to do when meet with the new executives is explain, okay, our labor might be a little more expensive here in this area, but the lack of absenteeism in comparison with southern states, the high quality of workmanship, you just can't match it. I've challenged them, just be careful, look at that before you make any decisions. And also the ability to do custom work. I mean, so many of our companies can do custom work. They can make a wood chipper that's, each one different from the last one, and make different custom additions to it. It's not your classic assembly line. So we try very hard to keep them here, and so far we've been pretty successful in keeping our big companies here. So, and that kind of undergirds the whole economy. So, but I do think, if we see it turn down next year or whenever it does come, it's all hands on deck for us. And we work harder during those times than we do. Work pretty hard the rest of the time too, but it's all hands on deck when we are facing something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, Amy. Okay. Madam Chair. Oh, by the way, can I just say one more thing? So I'm dressed casually today because we are moving. So we've been in 200 East Broadway for many years, but before that, Middle Michigan was at 111 South University, which is actually right around the corner, and it's actually attached to the building, even though it's a separate parcel. So that came available earlier this year, and we bought it from Isabella Bank. And so it's currently being finished off in terms of the interior, and we just today started moving stuff over, so,
Nice.
yeah. So that's why I'm dressed casual.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. All right, at this time, we will look for any additions or deletions to the agenda. Manager DeSenz.
I'd like to ask that the City Commission consider adding an item under new business, and that would be the consideration of approval of a contract with Manor Casterison for interim finance director services.
I move to add that agenda item. Is that a motion necessary for that?
I'll second that.
Okay.
All those in favor say yes.
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 All those opposed, the same. Motion carries. We're adding to the agenda under new business, number 14. Is there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? I will entertain a motion to accept the agenda as changed.
I move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, at this time, we have public input on agenda items. If you are here to speak on any of the agenda items that you wish to speak at that time, or wish to come forward, you can. If you're here for any of the public hearings, I would suggest that you wait until the public hearing time. At this time, you may come forward if you wish to speak on something on the agenda. Please remember that when you're brought forward to speak on an agenda item, you are speaking your time, you're taking your time to do this, and there will be no answers from the dais, though sometimes we'll reach out to you later if we feel that there's someone else that you can reach out to. If you wish to speak at this time, you may step to the podium. You'll be given 5 minutes once you state your name and address. If you're joining us by Zoom, you may raise your hand, use the raise hand feature, or *9 if you're joining Zoom by phone. You'll be let into the meeting and asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this time? Is there anyone on Zoom?
No raised hands.
Okay, we have someone coming forward. Are there any emails?
No emails.
Okay, come on forward.
Bill Gerstlauer, 1514 Gaylord Street. Just a quick question. I'm wondering if the previous speaker would have any benefit of our use of Placer AI with, tracking people shopping and businesses and that. Question. Thought.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? All right, seeing no interest, we will close the public input on agenda items. We'll move to receipt of petitions and communications.
Petitions and communications this evening includes monthly report on police-related citizen complaints received.
Okay. We're going to move on to the consent items. Are there any consent items that the commission would like moved off the consent calendar and placed in the regular agenda? Seeing none, Manager DeSenza.
Consent items this evening includes approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held August 26, 2024, receive fall 2024 Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe 2% funding request from city departments, receive proposed 2025 annual operating budget and set a public hearing for November 11, 2024 on the same, consider resolution to amend 2024 operating budget, consider setting a public hearing for September 23, 2024 to hold a public hearing to allow for public input and to consider the adoption of section 110.27 vendors in the City of Mount Pleasant Code of Ordinances and set fee schedule. Consider setting a public hearing for September 23rd, 2024 to hold a public hearing to allow for public input and to consider the adoption of section 110.28 transitory food service units in the City of Mount Pleasant Code of Ordinances and set fee schedule, and consider approval of payrolls and warrants.
All right, do I have a motion to accept the consent items as presented?
I move that we accept the consent items as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, we're moving into the public hearings. We have 3 of them tonight. Manager DeSenza.
Our first public hearing is to consider the text change TC 24-01 Building Standards in Commercial Districts. Planning and Community Development Director Manuela Povidaico is joining us via Zoom to discuss a number of proposed zoning ordinance amendments recommended by the Planning Commission and staff. The proposed amendments ease restrictions in the commercial districts, creating more options for developers to invest in the community. I'm going to hand it over to Manuela to provide the presentation and answer any questions the City Commission may have.
All right, good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me well and see the slides?
Yes.
Thank you for confirming. So we're here today as a follow-up to our last meeting, August 12th, for the public hearing for the zoning ordinance change proposal. As presented previously, the overall goal for the zoning text amendment is to provide greater design flexibility within commercial districts, but it also touches upon regulations that reach all districts citywide. More specifically, the Planning Commission has recommended the text changes that you can see highlighted in this slide. So I'm going to go through each one of the categories. The first category are text changes that add flexibility to how the frontage build-out rule works today as they relate to developments within City 4 and City 5 districts, so basically our commercial or mixed-use districts. This rule requires building facades to occupy at least 60% of the principal frontage to ensure that buildings are the prominent feature of development. The first change will allow for a reduction of the 60% build-out rule in specific situations such as narrow sites and for when there are greater site access needs and design limitations. This text change will more easily enable developments, especially drive-through establishments and other auto-oriented uses. It also clarified that the 60% build-out rule only applies to the principal frontage on corner lots to ensure that site plans can accommodate parking at the back of the building. The second category are text changes related to rules that regulate the interior of buildings, which are only applicable to City 5. The first change will be to remove the minimum ceiling height requirement of 11 feet, as high ceilings, they tend to increase heating and cooling costs, and depending on the building's use, high ceilings may not make sense, such as the dentist office that was approved along Broadway. The second amendment is to replace the minimum 2-story requirement to instead require building facades to be at least 24 feet in height along the street. A minimum facade height helps achieve the goals of enclosure while it avoids development stagnation of minimum story requirements as described by the Congress of New Urbanism and advised by the Zoning Reform Toolkit by the American Planning Association. The third category relates to setback rules that are only applicable again within City 5 districts. The first item is to remove the 0-foot front setback requirement for corner lots and instead allow corner lot buildings to set back up to 15 feet from the front lot line, which is consistent with how mid-block lot requirements work today. This text change will apply along South Mission, where it is crucial that we ensure good driver visibility when entering the right-of-way from intersections. The next is to remove the maximum 24-foot side setback requirement to give more flexibility with building placement. Since the 60% build-out rule will still be applicable, a significant portion of the lot will continue to be occupied by a building, ensuring that the zoning ordinance form-based code urban design principles can still be achieved. At the last category, you have 2 items that would apply beyond commercial districts, so in residential districts as well. The first item is to amend the definition of principal frontage to address situations when the building's address and main entrance are not located along the narrow side of the lot. This text change will allow developments and improvements that better match the surrounding context and will help avoid sending projects to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll also be amending the administrative waiver section to allow the city planner to enable up to a 10% deviation of dimensional standards, as also suggested by the Zoning Reform Toolkit, since the current allowance is only 5%. These zoning text changes are long coming, as they were spurred by the Planning Department outreach efforts that happened in 2023, referred to as Zoning for Economic Opportunity, ZEO. I've placed a summary of ZEO findings at the City Commission packet per our previous conversation during the introduction. After hearing out 20 participants at ZEO interviews, I also observed how the zoning ordinance was working when doing project review throughout 2023 and 2024. These proposed changes were also discussed at the Planning Commission September 1st and November 2nd work sessions, which ultimately led us to where we are here today. So at the City Commission introduction of the text amendment, there was one item that was brought forward as a discussion topic. The Commission questioned if we should indeed be removing the 2nd-story requirement along South Mission Street, since the Commission would like to see higher density developments along that portion of the corridor. At the meeting, staff has suggested to approach such policy goal through carrot types of regulations in the form of incentives, as opposed to the stick. The Commission asked staff to look at East Lansing as a precedent. So what we did was to analyze this Lansing zoning map, and we have selected the East Village District to conduct a case study, since Grand River has been brought up to us as a precedent during the Mission Street Improvement Plan work that we've been working on throughout this year. The East Village zoning regulations are what we call a form-based code, which prioritizes bulk regulations over use to achieve good design outcomes, similar to the Mount Pleasant zoning ordinance. East Lansing's localized form-based codes are split into 4 sub-areas, and I'll highlight the Grand River Avenue, Bogue Street area, where there is today a large mixed-use development that was built according to these rules, which have been approved in 2006. So to simplify this case study comparison to Mount Pleasant, I created this chart where you can compare the 2 cities' populations, both of which have seen a decline, and then zoning rules that relate to density, uses, building, and ceiling heights. Height-wise, you can see that while Mount Pleasant requires every development to build at least 2 stories, East Lansing does not have a minimum number of story requirements. So there are no stick regulations in that regard. At the same time, while Mount Pleasant allows only up to 5 stories along Mission, East Lansing allows up to 8 stories along Grand River, with the ability of developers to build 10 stories should the City Council approve such additional bulk. This finding helps support the original idea of removing the second-story mandate, but consider allowing denser developments as a way to encourage mixed-use buildings along South Mission and potentially downtown. Ceiling heights is another way of regulating height. However, while Mount Pleasant currently requires ceilings to be a minimum of 11 feet, which has implications again on heating, cooling, the interior design of spaces, East Lansing does not have such a requirement, and instead it limits the height of the ground floor from floor to floor and not floor to ceiling. This is a way to ensure that buildings are capped at a maximum height. This rule is, however, exempted along Grand River. This finding also supports the removal of Mount Pleasant minimum ceiling height requirement while keeping the maximum floor-to-floor requirement of 14 feet and 25 feet depending on the use. Last, East Lansing has an interesting density rule which requires redevelopments to provide for an increase in density. When I asked East Lansing's planning staff about how it works in practice, they said that they would review applications on a case-by-case basis, and while they would prioritize having projects that add additional dwelling units, the increase in density could potentially be, alternatively, satisfied by additional bulk or by proposing greater mix of uses. The last slide on East Lansing shows a case study development that you may be familiar with, which is called Hub on Campus. It is essentially a mixed-use student housing development with many amenities and which provide for smaller unit offerings. So all that said, planning staff does advise the City Commission to proceed with the proposed text change as presented at the City Commission introduction meeting today. While, as previously mentioned, we will continue to monitor how the ordinance performs and what are some of the incentive tools that we can do within zoning or otherwise that would help implement Mount Pleasant in the future with more dense developments. And that would be an effort also to try to address the Commission's and the Master Plan's goal for achieving higher density development, especially along Mission and potentially within downtown. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Just comment.
Yes.
Manuela.
Please speak into the microphone.
I want to thank Manuela for this presentation because I know that I was the one who was asking for the comparison to East Lansing and other, for the comparison so that we know what we're talking about. And I think this helps. So again, thanks for doing this work because it helps us make the kind of decision that we need to make, for our city to, to sustain it. Thanks again.
Commissioner Bush, did you have something?
That's pretty much what I was going to say. Impressive. We already had many questions answered tonight. This is great.
Okay. All right, at this time, we will go to a motion.
I believe this is a public.
Oh, that's right, this is a public hearing. Is there, I keep thinking I've already done this. All right, so at this time, this is a public hearing, and if you have something that you wish to add or questions that you would wish to present, no questions will be answered, but if you'd like to come forward, you can step up to the podium. You'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. If you're joining us by Zoom, you can use the raised hand feature or *9. If you're joining Zoom by phone, you'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward on this public hearing?
Good evening. My name's Tim Beebe. I have engineering and surveying company in town, Central Michigan Surveying and Development at 2257 East Broomfield Road. I'd just like to say that I've had a business here for 25 years. And this was the first time that I was asked by a planner, what of the ordinance causes you problems? What causes developers problems? And it's really nice to see that, we sat down, we talked through it, and it was followed through and changes are being made. So I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else out here that wishes to come forward? Is there anyone on Zoom?
No raised hands.
Any emails?
No emails.
All right, at this time, I will close the public hearing. And I will ask the commission, are there any clarifications that are needed prior to going to a motion?
Just a bit of discussion or
Okay.
for the commission, and then I would make a motion. I feel like in 2020, we adopted the master plan, which put into place these rules currently. So the second story requirements being one of them. I think a big thing with not just this, but other items on the agenda tonight is about use of the space of land that we have. We don't have a whole lot. A lot of it's already developed, and then that's kind of it. I don't like removing the second story, the requirement for a second story development. And I think it's because I look at it like a long-term development. These buildings will be in place for the next 50 to 100 years. And there's a lot of vacant buildings as they are in the downtown space. I personally don't think, I think being careful and having like incremental development is better than jumping in and just reducing these requirements that we put in place just 4 years ago. My big thing, I guess, on it is just, we went to the zoning economic opportunity outreach in 2023. Reading through the memo on it, it sounds like we asked a lot of developers what would make development easy. And a lot of developers came back and said, remove the rules you have in place. So we put in these rules, it feels like, to me, and then we're just backing away from them. The density, I think the density in it is important. And so I would move to approve the text changes with the exemption of text changes regarding the requirements of a second story on a new development.
Is that your motion?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not voting on that till we have more discussion.
Yeah, no,
okay,
but-
so
but-
may I clarify that
Yes.
then? My understanding of Robert's Rules of Order is that I may put forward a motion.
Yep,
If it's seconded, that there's additional discussion that may have.
yep.
And then we could vote down that motion. So if Brian here, obviously in opposition, I believe, wanted to vote down the motion, that could take place. And then a new motion could be made in the same public
Yes.
hearing. So
Yes.
that's what I'm operating off of.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can put forward a motion if somebody that supports it wants to second it, and you have to second it if you support it. You can't second it and then argue against it. Okay? So if you would like to second it and support it, you may. If there's no second, the motion dies. Is there a second to the motion?
I think that clarifies conversation.
Okay. Yes.
I mean, I just don't think it's wise to say we've talked, like, Tim, I appreciate your comments. You know, especially after a presentation from the Middle Michigan Development Corporation, I mean, we have people that have money, we have people that have access to money that probably none of us do. And we sit at a seat and we say, nope, we don't want to do that. What do you mean you don't want to do that? We have people that want to put money into our community, that want to, I mean, especially after this, we have people that are saying, we're $57 million of company investments. And the reason there's not more in the city is because we sit at a table having no money to put into developments. And people stand at that podium and say, I have this idea where I want to put millions of dollars into our community, whether it's us or whether it's the planning commission, and we just say, we don't feel like that because it just doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense is us losing jobs, us losing tax base because people that are making money are moving to other communities. I think the more we can do, and I appreciate Manuela so much, the more we can do to make it easier for people that have money to put money into our community instead of going to Clare, instead of going to Elma, because guess what? Both of those communities are thriving right now, and Mount Pleasant is not. Mount Pleasant is, I mean, we look at all the buildings that we have empty right now, and then we say, well, no, because 4 years ago we said we wanted a second story, let's leave the buildings empty, because that's what they're going to do, is they're going to remain empty every time there's a barrier for somebody to build something in. And that's why we have the SBX problem. That's why we have the Kaya problem. We have all these issues because we have people that are sitting and saying, for no apparent reason, to make it difficult for people to put money into our community, and I am completely against that.
So do you have a motion?
I move that we approve this as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I would just say that I'm not against development. I'm just looking to the long term, and I think that increasing density into the space is important. I think that again, as we're looking to maintain density within the city, rather than having further and further outfill as space is used up within the city, that it's important to put rules in place of what we would like to see. Right now, we were talking about the carrot and stick metaphor. We're removing the stick right now, but we aren't putting in place a carrot. I know that there is intention to, but they're being swapped out without any kind of clear path forward. And I do appreciate staff, but in this particular case, I like the rules that were put in place. I think since 2020 to 2024, there has been a complete overhaul of city government leadership. We have a new city manager, we have a new city planner. Most of us were elected within the last 3 years. So I think that there was a long-term shift in government that occurred, and I think that there is a movement away from intentional design that was put in place with the master plan. So as we're dealing with questions, maybe in the future we should look at more of what our master plan says, and if we, as a new government, want to continue with that.
Okay. Commissioner Eke?
As always, I appreciate this conversation that we're having, even if it's minimal here. And as I said earlier, I appreciate the presentation because it gives us a comparative, city, some comparison. I know that I asked for that because I had nothing, for comparison. We do see, I understand my colleagues' concern. I agree with you that we need to think about the future, but we also need to make sure that we have a sustainable environment, that we are fiscally, alive, and we see that they, through the comparison provided us that even in East Lansing, there is no story requirement, at least, in one of the pieces she talks about. So it's not harming East Lansing. I'm familiar with East Lansing. It's a college town. It has business, so I think that we have to be forward thinking. We have to move with the times. We cannot be stuck in the past. If there are obstacles to our pathways to financial sustainability and survival, we need to look at those particular options. And what we're presented with here says to me that if we are to do some of this, what is recommended here, as this clearly researched, presentations suggest, there is the possibility that our financial standing at this moment, our city's financial survival or business survival at this moment might change. I want to see change. I want something that is transformative. And this seems to me to suggest some transformation. And I would support this because it provides that opportunity for transformation.
Vice Mayor?
I'll be supporting Commissioner Chapman's proposal mostly because I've seen that we haven't had the growth that we thought would come with the formation of that, proposal. So it's time to change it.
I add something. Plus, we need to improve our tax base. We can't continue to tax residents. The businesses would provide us some of that. Create some jobs, create new businesses. I am very uncomfortable with, tomorrow coming up with millage to tax residents for things that we need if this will help us. So that's fine.
Are there any other comments? Okay, we will go to a roll call.
Commissioner Wingard,
No.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Commissioner Eke,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alsager,
Yes.
Mayor Perschbacher.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
All right, now we're going to continue with our public hearing, and we have a public hearing on the water of the city's code ordinance. Manager DeSenza.
So the proposed ordinance would seek to amend Title V, Public Works, Chapter 52, Water of the city's Code of Ordinances entitled Administration and Enforcement. And this ordinance amendment in front of you would attempt to address an issue that fairly recently has come up with a large apartment complex where utilities are paid by a management firm. The city has experienced issues related to a management company responsible for the oversight of well over 100 units regarding utility billing payment. The proposed ordinance would ensure that water can remain on for residents while discouraging future management firms from being delinquent with payment. The ordinance primarily does two things. It increases delinquency fees on firms managing over 20 units to 10% only if, and I want to underline only if, the firm is late with their payment twice in a 12-month period. It also then requires the firm, if they are late within a 12-month period 2 times, they'll be required to put on a cash deposit equal to 3 months of utility charges for all properties underneath management. Continued failure on part of these firms could place the firm's rental license in jeopardy. The removal of this rental license would be a last resort and is effectively done through the second ordinance, which would be discussed in the public hearing after this one. Staff is recommending a motion to adopt the ordinance as provided after the public hearing.
All right. We have a public hearing again. At this time, I'm going to open for public comment. If you wish to come forward for this public hearing on the water of the city's code of ordinances, please step to the podium, state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. If you're joining us by Zoom, you may use the raised hand feature or *9. If you're joining Zoom by phone, you'll be asked to state your name and your address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward on this public hearing? Is there anyone on Zoom?
No raised hands.
Are there any emails?
No emails.
Okay. Seeing no one willing to come forward to speak on this or not wanting to come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing and move to the commission. Are there any clarifications that are needed at this time? Commissioner Chapman.
Well, initially I was against obviously being the bank for people not paying their water bills. But, you know, I think if this will allow people to keep that aren't at fault to keep their water on, I mean, I still wish there was a better way to do it than us be the bank for a company not paying their bills. But, I mean, if this is the best way to do it, I'm in favor of it.
Commissioner Eke?
I recall we had a conversation on this. My issue is accountability. If people are not taking care of their water bill, the city should not be paying the water bill of renters or companies that do not pay the water bill. And I don't want them to hold hostage people who live in these places because they are not being responsible. It therefore means that somebody has got to do it. Otherwise, we pay for it, and I don't want the city to be paying for it. So this is one way of holding them accountable. If it's going to do it, let's do it, so that we're not coming back to this again and again and again. The city is held hostage because they're not paying their water bill. The people who are living in these residences are also held hostage, are also traumatized by the fact that their water is being shut off for reasons that they have not caused. So I'm happy with this.
I will say that I am never a supporter of an exception making good policy because it never does. But in this case, as the city, our responsibility is to care for the residents.
Yes.
And this is what this does, is it keeps the companies at task. If a person is paying their rent and it includes their water bill in that rent payment, they should not have their water shut off because the company is not willing to put forth the money or unable to at that time. So I will be supporting this. Vice Mayor.
I'll also be supporting it, but I think in the future, this company may have solved their issue.
We hope so.
We just don't want it to be a problem again. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendation.
Second.
All right. We'll go with Chapman.
Second time tonight.
All right. We will go with a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Eke,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Winger,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alsager,
Yes.
Mayor Perschbacher.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right. Now we're moving on to the second half of this. This is another public hearing. Manager dissents, can you key this up?
Absolutely. So this one will be to amend Title 15 Land Use, Chapter 152, Housing Licensing Code of the city's Code of Ordinances. It tacks onto the previous city ordinance in the fact that we had discussed internally, we have these mechanisms, but what if you have a company that just doesn't comply with anything? They're not complying with paying their utility bills that they're due, and they're not complying with the city's requirement for the deposit. The ordinance that is in front of you then would allow the city to remove a rental license from a firm that is in default on a variety of charges such as taxes or utility bills. Again, I want to highlight that this would be a last resort, as obviously the idea is for the city to be able to keep people within the rental units that they are renting. That is the reason for the previous ordinance. Again, this becomes a last resort, but puts more teeth to it, that if a company is just completely unresponsive, is not working with us, we can't threaten to take their entire rental license away, which would then put in jeopardy every one of their units. I think in doing so, it would allow the city a lot more leverage for a company should they become unresponsive. After the public hearing, the staff is recommending a motion to approve the ordinance as provided.
Okay. As we move into the public hearing, again, if you wish to speak on this adoption, you may step to the podium. You'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. If you're joining us by Zoom, you may use the raised hand feature or *9 if you're joining Zoom by phone. You'll be let into the meeting, and you'll be asked to state your name and address and be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this at this time? Is there anyone on Zoom?
There is.
Okay.
Good evening, council members. My name is Jennifer Slayton. I currently reside at 3300 East Deerfield Road. I was a former tenant of the landlord in question that these ordinances were adopted for. I would like to thank the commission for the work that they have put forth to protect the members of the community from further incidences if this property management firm or any other property management firm were to have incidences that led to the work and the background behind these ordinances. And that is the end of my comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? No. Are there any emails?
There are none.
Okay. At this time, I will close the public hearing and turn to the commission. Are there any clarifications, comments? Commissioner Ake?
All right, I see the added text in F, failure to neglect. And, following it, section 5, effective date is that the ordinance takes effect 30 days after its adoption. So what happens to the residents? I mean, if we're going to protect them, we've got to protect them. What do we do? Do we tell them? Do they have enough time to move out?
That means that this ordinance, once we adopt it, it will start in October.
I understand. Oh,
Yeah.
as opposed to, okay, I'm reading it the other way.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. So it becomes effective in October of this year.
Yes.
All right, so the question that I still have a question, and it relates to F. So in the event that we enforce this particular ordinance, what's the mechanism for making sure that residents, we safeguard them? Because the goal is to safeguard them. And so what do we do? Who becomes, who is responsible? Do we send them a letter or something saying this is what's happening, that the landlord has lost their rental, I don't want to have people thrown out into the street because we've got an angry, property owner or, who now is angry at us for rescinding their license and now retaliate, against the residents. For me, it becomes too punitive. So I want clarification on this, as we discuss it.
Yeah, so if I can take you through the decision-making process and getting to this point here, obviously, as we were going forward with the issue that we had with the particular management firm, the city had chosen to tag a number of doors to notify residents that there was an issue of this, and that is part of our requirement. But our current existing ordinance requires then that if the person or the entity responsible for payment does not pay by the shutoff date, that water is shut off. And so that effectively gives folks that are living in these rental situations virtually zero notice other than the door tags. They might get the door tag saying that you're getting shut off, let's say 48, 72 hours or something like that. But very, very little notice. We all agree that's a very small window. The idea was to expand that window. And so I think that this would do that. If we were to get into a situation in which the management company is being completely unresponsive, we would go through a process internally to try to identify the tenants at these facilities that could be impacted, send them some sort of communication to make sure that they know, and probably not just one, but multiple, to make sure that they know that their landlord is potentially losing their rental license. And I think that will give people a lot more of a lead time to try to figure out alternative living arrangements if possible.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want clarity. Thanks.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the ordinance updating as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and then we'll take a roll call.
Commissioner Ake?
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wingard?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Bush?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Altseiger?
Yes.
Mayor Perschbacher?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, motion carries, and we will move on from here. We're moving into new business. Manager DeSenz, can you set this up, please?
Absolutely. Yep. So the new business item in front of you is to consider the approval of the termination of a PRD agreement for the southwest corner of Crawford and Broomfield as received. The Planning and Community Development Director, Manuela Povideco, who is joining us via Zoom, will present on a proposed dissolution of a planned residential development agreement and rezoning of a particular property. With that, I'll hand it over to Manuela, as I know she's going to go into a number of different details in her presentation, be able to answer any questions that the City Commission may have.
Thank you so much. So the Planning Commission has approved the termination of the PRD agreement for the southwest corner of Crawford and Broomfield at their last regular meeting on September 5th of 2024. So now staff is requesting that the City Commission approve such document to be able to proceed with such areas rezoning from PRD to hardline zoning to align the zoning map with the land use policy set forth by the city's master plan, future land use map, and advanced redevelopment ready community goals by streamlining the development approval process, ultimately helping unlock future development in the area. In the near term, property owners want to build a new private school and 5 new multiple family apartment buildings on the premises. In the long run, the rezoning will more easily enable future subdivisions for lower density residences, including affordable housing and commercial developments. So I'm going to go through some background here to explain how this process started. First, the Central Christian Academy is looking to build a private K-12 school on parcel 17306. Such parcel is currently zoned planned residential development, which is a zoning district designation designed to permit a flexible means of development, allowing for a mixture of types of residential units, so 1, 2, and multiple family dwelling units. While PRDs could allow for schools under the old zoning regime, such parcel was included in a PRD agreement on May 25th of 2000, which assigned the parcel to a condominium development. That said, the school development would only be able to occur if the Planning Commission and the City Commission were to approve an amendment to such previously approved PRD agreement, or if the property were to be rezoned in accordance with the current zoning ordinance. Here, I'm also sharing some stats on the size of the development. We don't have specifics, but the goal here is to start with the first phase of construction already next year to provide K3 or K12, K4 educational services for approximately 45 to 50 students. And then the long-term plan will be to basically grow a grade each year with a long-term projection of approximately 200 students. In the fall of 2023, staff held a pre-application meeting with a few representatives of the school board and Tim Beebe, who's the surveyor who's working on this project. Staff discussed the 2 alternatives that I mentioned with the school board, but advised that staff would like to take this opportunity to apply for a city-led rezoning of such parcel, as well as all other surrounding parcels that had been included within such PRD agreement in the 2000s. So that would be parcel 17,300, 304, 305, and 306. The city's proposed rezoning would also include parcel 17,303, which is that corner parcel, which was not included in the original PRD agreement, but has been mapped as PRD since its incorporation within the city limits, including within the current zoning map. Such parcel is basically currently stuck and cannot be developed unless it is rezoned. The main reason for city staff's area-wide rezoning request is because the current PRD designation does not match the master plan future land use map and corresponding zoning district designations, as such policy map assigns the area not only for residential, but also for commercial development. This is an effort to advance more walkable and sustainable neighborhoods, which is also heavily supported and codified in the city's current zoning ordinance through the pedestrian sheds requirements, which basically must be indicated by applicants when advancing rezonings. Pedestrian sheds are intended to locate where the neighborhood's common destination is located, often identified as its commercial center, and then from there, the pedestrian shed would indicate the radius of the area that can be comfortably walked by pedestrians with a 5-minute walk, so basically a quarter of a mile. Consistency with the future land use map is further explained in the city's master plan. As stated in Book 1, Sustainable Land Use, The land use classifications of the future land use map provide the basis for evaluating future rezoning requests. Zoning actions that are consistent with the future land use map usually receive deferential and favorable judicial review if challenged. The master plan should be the principal source of information in the investigation of all rezoning requests. The city may initiate rezoning as necessary to place land in conformance with the future land use map, or it may wait for property owners to come forward on a case-by-case basis. So to assist with that comparison, I've created the below chart that summarizes what the master plan says about each parcel within the proposed rezoning area and their corresponding future land use designation, the zoning district that should be assigned for each parcel, as well as what will be the most appropriate uses within them. Then I'm comparing such information with the current and proposed zoning district designations. As you can see, there are two proposed zoning districts that are not, at first glance, matching the master plan future land use map. Designation of SDU for parcel 17304 and the designation for civic zone for parcel 17306. So I'll now talk about each one of them to explain the staff's consideration and reasoning when pursuing the proposed rezoning for your consideration. So the first item is parcel 17304, which is currently owned by Central Michigan University. All other Central Michigan University parcels are currently zoned SDU, so University Special District, which is stated in the zoning ordinance as a district that recognizes the unique character and development of a central campus of state universities. As such, zoning exempts such parcels from the ordinance rules and procedures and allows projects to go directly to CMU for approval. In case properties are conveyed beyond CMU's hands, the current zoning framework assigns another district to enable development under the city zoning ordinance without needing a zoning map amendment to define which rules would apply in case properties are no longer owned by CMU and are therefore other types of uses and development may take place. That said, to be consistent with the current zoning framework, staff is suggesting to designate the CMU-owned parcel as SDU, and we'll be supplementing the rezoning in the future with a zoning text amendment that would allow the zoning designation to automatically convert the site's regulation to CD3, should the property ever be conveyed in the future, allowing therefore for that site to be developed for single-family detached residences or duplexes, which will be in alignment with the master plan land use policy. The other parcel is 17306, which is a subject parcel where a school development is being proposed. If this rezoning is approved, such school development will still be subject to a future site plan review by the Planning Commission. While the rezoning would be enabling a school development as opposed to single-family detached or duplexes, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the current requirements for air right rezonings that exceed 80 acres, which must designate a portion of the area as civic zone. The requirements include needing to designate areas as civic spaces and civic buildings. While I stated in my report that there is a minimum percentage requirement for civic zones, I want to clarify that such percentage is actually for civic spaces. However, civic buildings in the form of meeting halls and third places, areas where the community can meet on an occasional basis, are still required, which could be satisfied by the school through a large meeting room that can accommodate community meetings and the like. While the city-led rezonings are technically exempted from such requirements, compliance with these requirements help the city proceed in greater alignment with its own rules. Therefore, the civic zone designation on this parcel will better align the city's current zoning map with its current zoning ordinance requirements. I would also like to supplement my technical considerations with policy ones. Schools can serve as an anchor institution in a community, helping attract residential and commercial developments, create new jobs, retain and attract new residents to the area, all of which can overall increase the community's tax base. Take some of the findings of the consultants who are working today on the Mission Street Improvement Plan that were shared with the City Commission a few weeks ago. While we've seen a decline in college student populations, we've seen an increase in long-term residents in our community, especially those within family formation years, so 30 to 45-year-olds. Many families decide where they want to live and if they want to stay in a community based on access to education of choice for their kids. Many are willing to pay a premium for homes near high-quality schools, as we see in many communities in the country. A new private school in Mount Pleasant will offer another option to parents and will also create new job opportunities to some of our college grads. Such increased activity, more staff, teachers, families, have a cascading effect on attracting more local businesses, including after-school programs, which are also seem to lack in the community. As such, developers may see more potential for new housing and commercial establishments that cater to families and staff. As an example, an affordable housing developer wanted to propose townhomes that would follow a rent-to-own model in this precise location where we are proposing the area-wide rezoning. Being close to essential services such as schools, groceries, doctors is often a requirement for those looking to invest. Overall, private schools can increase the community's reputation and enhance its overall perception, having long-term positive effects on the local economy and tax base as the area becomes more attractive. Overall, aside from aligning the zoning map with the future land use map, the proposed rezoning will facilitate and encourage development in this area, simply because mapping hardline zoning on these properties will allow for a more efficient project review process and a more predictable development pattern. This is because a list of all allowable uses, as well as the design standards for all future development parcel plans and site plan reviews, are already codified within the current zoning ordinance under the proposed hardline zoning designations. Civic zone, general urban, and suburban character districts, meaning that applicants can simply design a project in compliance with the current zoning ordinance requirements and have such project approved by the Planning Commission. In Mount Pleasant, this process takes only 1 month, which is much faster than the 4-month process or more that PRD sites would need to follow to be approved, as they would require public hearings and planning and city commission approvals as set forth by the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. Furthermore, a PRD plan and a detailed site plan are required to accompany a PRD agreement request. These procedures requirements have a lot of unpredictability to property owners who would need to spend several thousands of dollars on attorney fees, survey, and engineering services to go through each discretionary review. Oftentimes, this is a negotiation-intensive process between developers and local governments, since PRDs are, by their nature, intended to be deviations from the zoning ordinance, differently than site plan reviews under hardline zoning, which would simply follow rules that have already gone through public hearings and negotiations when being drafted and approved by the elected officials. In conclusion, processes that are less predictable and reliable lead to increased costs and delays, ultimately leading to development stagnation. This is the case of this area in Mount Pleasant, which has not seen much development in the past 20 years. That said, staff believes that an area-wide rezoning for this area to dismantle the PRD designation and map hardline zoning will ultimately unlock future development in this 100+ acre area site. This is an opportunity to create more sustainable and walkable neighborhoods that can increase housing options in the region, considering that the city does not have many other options to expand within its existing footprint. Ultimately, the proposed rezoning is an effort consistent with the goals of the Redevelopment Ready Communities RRC certification that the city holds since 2019 from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which includes streamlining development approval processes and encourage economic development activities. So to pursue the rezoning, the PRD agreement dated from May 25, 2000, and all subsequent amendments must be first terminated. According to the zoning ordinance, no approved plan shall be terminated after development commences, except with the approval of the Planning Commission, City Commission, and all parties interested in the land. As such, the city's attorney has drafted the attached termination of the PRD agreement for all sites that had been previously included in the PRD agreement from the 2000, and has advised staff to pursue its approval by the Planning City Commissions prior to filing for the rezoning. In the process of drafting the termination of the PRD agreement, which is under your revision today, staff has coordinated with current property owners and found that current owners of the partially developed parcel, so 17303, would like to build another 5 apartment buildings in the next few years, which had been previously approved in 2003. The reason is because the portion of the site where the 5 new buildings would be located had already been completed with sanitary sewer and water infrastructure. As such, the owners requested the city to add language in the termination of the PRD agreement, vesting the construction of such previously approved buildings. That was the subject of the April 4th, 2024 Planning Commission work session, where the Planning Commission indicated consensus to proceed with said language and enable the property owners to finalize those developments. The property owners have also indicated that they will work with city staff in the future to split such parcel and sell for housing development, which will be required to comply with City 4 district regulations once the rezoning is approved. Last, to ensure that the termination of the PRD agreement does not automatically convert to the existing sites to SDA, Agriculture Special District, as set forth by the current zoning ordinance, the termination of the PRD agreement is conditioned upon the City and Planning Commission's approval of the rezoning as indicated in such document. In conclusion, staff seeks City Commission approval of the termination of PRD agreement to then be able to seek signatures from all current property owners of such parcels and proceed with the rezoning application. So I have here just a timeline of what are the next steps. So this is where we are right now. The Planning Commission has approved the termination of the PRD agreement at September 5th. And then now we are here for review and approval by the City Commission. And then I'll be collecting the signatures from property owners. And then once that's done, I'm legally able to file for the rezoning to then come forward with the Planning Commission introduction, public hearing, and then City Commission introduction, public hearing. This concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Manuela. Are there any questions?
I have lots of questions.
Okay.
All right. So again, Manuela, thank you for this very comprehensive, rich, it's expansive presentation. I mean, it's a lot for me to, I read this before coming here and I'm listening to you, and it is a lot to unpack within such a short period. So I have questions. I do know this particular corner, and I'm assuming that it is the corner where the cabin, on the other side of the cabin with the lights, right?
Yes.
Yeah, south, south. Okay. There are already existing, I see you have West Point here, so it says to me that you've talked to them. So questions that I have to do with the busyness. I mean, like the busyness in terms of traffic on that particular corner. What are the considerations, what considerations have been given in your conversations about that? The other has to do, I like what you're talking about, but as you know me, I want clarity, I want clarification, I want comprehensive, at least understanding of what's happening. There are already existing apartment complexes and now you're talking about additional townhouses in that particular location. There is a school about a mile or less than a mile from that. What is there a policy in terms of the proximity of those two schools, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm just, because I also work with other places in other, communities where there is something about the distance between the schools. So I'm just asking. So I want to know what the implications, what if there is a state protocol regarding the proximity of the two of the schools, in terms of, the implications for them. All right. So these are some of the questions that I have. And then what kinds of conversation have you had? I don't seem to recall here, maybe I've missed something, with CMU regarding the reclassification of its property. I apologize that I'm asking you way too many questions, but I do need answers.
No worries. Thank you so much. I put everything down, so hopefully I'm not going to forget anything. So just regarding traffic, yes, this was a consideration. I did speak with the Road Commission and then the Department of Public Works as well about traffic, since I'm not the traffic expert. So this Crawford and Broomfield are designed to accommodate a lot of traffic. We are not close to the counts that that this county shared that we will be able to get to. The way it works is a rezoning does not have direct implications on traffic, right, on amount of vehicles. It's only after a development occurs that you could see if there's going to be a need for road widenings or any signals or anything like that. The way it works for planning review is that, let's say, this PRD termination agreement is approved, the rezoning is approved, and then the school development comes forward. Once that happens, they're going to have to submit the drawings and detailed information about everything they're going to be doing, including the site plan and the amount of vehicles that are going to be stacked on their site. To make sure, Broomfield is a high-speed road, right? So we would not definitely want to allow the school to utilize the road for stacking of vehicles. So the reason for that site being so large for a school development of this size is because the site plan would basically require the vehicles to enter the site through a driveway approach and then stack within that site in order to not impact negatively Broomfield. For the commercial corner, if that is developed in the future, depending on the type of development, the Planning Commission has the discretion to ask for a traffic study. In which case, if let's say is a high intensity commercial use at that corner that could attract a lot of vehicles, let's say we're talking about a new entertainment venue or something like that, then a traffic study would either be flagged by staff or the Planning Commission, and then the applicant would need to fix anything they need to fix on the road. That could be in the form of widenings or signals or anything like that. So they would be working with the Road Commission, who would be a part of the development approval process in the same way that I bring the Michigan Department of Transportation when we're doing site plan review for commercial properties that in front Mission Street. So that's kind of my answer to the first question. The second question about existing apartment complexes and the townhomes. The townhomes was a comment about one actual development that wanted to come to this specific location in town. So I can say that based on that, there may be business out there for more residential development in the city of Mount Pleasant. That development was, you probably recall, it was a company called CHN. They wanted to do the pilot, so apply for LIHTC funding through the state for affordable housing development. And one of the requirements with the qualified allocation plan for affordable housing is that it needs to be very close, so basically within a mile from important essential services. So that includes schools, that includes doctors, that includes commercial establishment, pharmacies, grocery shops, and all of that. With doing the rezoning and having a school, having potentially pharmacies and other types of commercial developments at that corner will better enable us to, sell those properties, or property owners to sell those properties for affordable housing development or any other type of residential development like townhomes. The city FAR designation would certainly allow for townhome development in that location. And then third, schools less than 1 mile. I'm not aware of any buffer requirements. We do have buffer requirements within the zoning ordinance for other types of uses, but we do not have that for schools. And I'm not aware of state buffer requirements. But thank you for the question. But again, I don't think that we have any buffer requirements. And then for the last one, conversations with CMU. My point of contact there is Jonathan Webb. He had actually come to the previous planning commission where I unfortunately did not reach a quorum to vote on this matter. He was not able to come to last Thursday or today, but he did send me an email saying that he's in full support of this proposal. I had multiple meetings with CMU, and they are totally, on with this proposal. One of the things that Jonathan shared with me is that it will just make their review process much easier. So as I noted in my presentation, anything that comes forward for development at CMU land goes to CMU for review. Here we are in a limbo situation in which we have CMU owning that parcel, but they cannot do anything with it because there's basically no zoning designation that they can work with. The PRD, CMU is not going to get into business to develop residential. So this would allow them to use the property either for CMU purposes or if they want to sell in the future to get more revenue. What the the rezoning application will include is a zoning text amendment to allow CD3 regulations to apply in case any portion of the land is sold to another party for residential development. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Excellent, thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns?
So the only concern I have is we're looking to rezone the 32 acres into civic space, and we're actively in lawsuit with the state right now about I believe a couple hundred acres, or 120 Mount Pleasant Center property, number of acres up there.
It's a little closer to 300.
300. We're currently in lawsuit with the state about 300 acres that we're actively trying to avoid being locked into public use only, which would essentially be civic space as I understand it. So we couldn't just a non-taxable base and everything there.
Even more limiting than that, it would be, from the state's perspective, public purpose only. So those things that we would utilize for, let's say, parks, city buildings, those kind of things. So even more of a limiting sort of scope.
Yeah, so just drawing the comparison there of we're taking one action on the north end of town with a very large chunk of development space where we're actively trying to avoid limiting tax base, limiting civic space, and then on the south end of town approving additional civic space. I'm not certain if it meets with our master plan. That's kind of my concern there, but I leave it to the rest of the commission for any additional discussion.
But the entire space is 100 and some acres? Manuela, what's the
Over
entire-
150.
150 acres or more? Okay. So it's a portion of it. Commissioner Chapman?
Well, it seems like I think of, well, what is that place called? There's a barbecue place in Corktown, Detroit. And it was an empty space. Nobody wanted to be there. And Slo's Barbecue. And Slo's Barbecue came in and they said, well, we're gonna be the anchor for development here. And nobody wanted to be there. It was a terrible, and now Ford had just put millions and millions of dollars in Corktown because it started a chain of events. And so I think for whatever the amount of acreage is, to put some kind of anchor there to say, well, now we have 112 more acres or whatever it is, to then start developing around that and to be able to put then affordable housing because there's a school. I mean, it makes sense to me. I think especially, I mean, I keep going back to this book because we talked about this today.
Pretty handy.
If we're gonna bring in more jobs, I tell you what, 15 years ago, it wasn't uncommon that CMU students were staying here. And now I talk with many CMU students often and they're like, yeah, I'm going back home. If we can have a way to start keeping CMU students here, and, I'm for it. And so I'm pro-development in case anybody was unsure.
Commissioner Eke?
I think the important thing here is also to create, opportunity for diversification of what we have, what is available to people. And, Manuela mentioned that the opportunity, people don't want the same thing. We all don't want the same thing. And this, creates that particular opportunity. I'm also interested in this idea of, the creation of a civic zone. It was one of the questions that I wanted to ask and I forgot about it. You talked about creating a civic zone. And so in lieu of a civic zone, you indicated that a school could create a space or a room that is designated as civic space. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes. So basically the ordinance when we are doing area-wide rezonings require what we call third place, which is basically essentially any space that could be used for large meetings. So one thing that we can do is to talk with the school board to see if one of their meeting rooms could become available for community-wide meetings.
I'm interested in that. If we're going to do this, I do think that is important. So, it's one way that the school can also provide service to the community. and at least be in compliance.
Yeah, just to give an example, I used to handle a lot of planning meetings in schools when I was working in New York. I think it's something that it would be lovely to start doing. So we're not, asking folks to come to City Hall, but we're actually going more into the community to have meetings about planning efforts.
Yes, that's good. I like, connections between the community, between, City Hall and, the community and residents. We've been trying to do that, to bridge that gap between, the institutions of learning and residents and the community. And if this is going to make that possible, so let's, I might be supportive. So I'm interested in that also.
Vice Mayor?
One thing that I was happy to hear with the presentation was that it's not only a school, but a school and some apartment buildings.
Yeah.
So that we're not losing all taxable base.
And it does sound like the PRD really restricts what can happen there. And if we want development, like we just got done talking about, we need to remove some of those restrictions. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the termination of the PRD agreement for the southwest corner of Crawford and Broomfield as received.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All right, and the Vice Mayor seconds. Do we need a roll call or can we do just a straight vote? All right, all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, now we are moving on to number 14. Manager dissents, you want to bring that up?
Absolutely.
Everyone should have a packet on their desk, at their desk.
So everyone should have a proposal from Manor Costerison. What I'm asking the City Commission to do this evening is to approve the contract for service with them for interim finance services. As I had emailed the City Commission last week, we do have the departure of our current finance director. Staff is working diligently on a recruitment plan to find the city's next finance director. With the director leaving on the 18th of September, there are some short-term concerns such as accounting review and oversight, purchasing oversight, and day-to-day support. As such, I'm asking the City Commission to approve the contract with Manor Costerison for interim finance service director services. If approved, the finance director and I would meet with Manor to discuss short-term operations until the new director is in place, with the goal for the replacement to be appointed by the end of the calendar year. With that, I'm happy to take any questions anyone may have.
Did you look at any other agencies or anything for this? I know it was a short time frame, so there's not a whole lot of time for rapid comparison and everything, but just kind of the search process.
Yeah, put feelers out there to other city managers that I knew who have utilized services before, and none of them have utilized such services. One other firm that is currently in its startup phase did come up, and we reached out to them, though we have yet to hear back from them. So we did reach out to another firm. The other issue is there's just not too many firms that I know of that offer this type of service, and so that was one of the restricting factors as well, too.
Gotcha. And then just to clarify on my understanding again, this is the search firm, or they're going to be performing the services until we're able to find?
Manor would be performing the services until we find an individual.
Thank you.
We are looking at proposals from search firms to see if we want to go that route with this. And I think that there's certainly some benefits for doing so, but obviously it would have to be a worthy return on investment. So staff is taking a look at that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ake?
I'm going to support this because, one, he says it's interim, but it's also urgent. Yeah, so we need somebody there right now, right? Otherwise, you'll be doing all the work.
I don't think we want that.
I don't think we want that exactly. So, yes.
I just want to clarify, so if we don't do this, does that mean Chris has to stay?
No.
If you want to try,
Hey,
I'm with you all the way.
Convince him.
We can try, I say let's give it a shot.
We could have him work remote on his time off.
Yes. On your lunch hour, could you do that?
No.
Fridays and weekends.
Yes.
No, I think we want somebody who would be focused on us.
I would like to say congratulations, Chris. It sounds like it's a very good position over there, and you can't beat we can't beat that commute there and everything that you got going. So
Yeah, we're gonna miss you.
Yes, we are.
You'll get fewer speeding tickets.
Yeah. Oh, were you not supposed to say that out loud? Sorry. Are there any other questions, clarifications? Okay. All right, we will entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the proposal to, what is it? Sign,
The proposal from Manor Casterison for
okay,
interim
the
finance.
proposal from
man-
Mana Casterism, for an interim financial
Services.
Director.
Director, Services, yes.
whatever the language is.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, at this time, we are moving to announcements on city-related business or issues and new business. This is where the commission comes forward, states what they have going on around the community or some interest that they have. Commissioner Eke.
Commissioner Eke would like to invite everybody to the peace event that is a collaboration, between the city and the Isabella County Human Rights Committee. It is happening on Saturday, September the 21st at Island Park Art Pavilion. It will be in commemoration of International Peace Day. It is open to the public. It's non-denominational. It's non-partisan. It is an opportunity to come, join us, celebrate peace, talk about peace.
Did you say what time?
It starts from 4 to 7 p.m. There will be a peace walk, and then there are guest speakers. We'll have guest speakers there.
Commissioner Wingard.
a communication I received on a project that's ongoing. Commissioner Eke, the topic sparked my mind. The city is in partnership with an organization and a professor from Central Michigan University to the professor has obtained saplings from Hiroshima trees. So these are trees that are the offspring of other trees that survived the bombings in Hiroshima, Japan. The initial seeds that were obtained did not germinate, unfortunately, back in 2023, last year, and then additional seeds were obtained, and they have since grown. They're going to see if they can weather the winter and everything. If they can, then we're looking to hopefully be planting on, I believe, Nelson Park sometime in early spring of 2025. So it's hoping that these items, just these saplings, thank you, I keep losing the word, hoping that they can survive the winter, and we'll go from there, but they'd be a very exciting cultural addition to our city, I think, so.
Yes, excellent. Anything else? Does the staff have anything they want to bring forward? No? All right. At this time, we're going to move to public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. If you wish to state something that was either on the agenda or is not on the agenda at this time, you may step forward. You'll be asked to state your name and address and be given 5 minutes. If you're joining us by Zoom, you may use the raised hand feature or *9, and you'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone on Zoom?
No raised hands.
Okay, are there any emails?
No emails.
Okay. Come forward.
Is this the right time?
Yes.
Okay, this is not an agenda item.
Correct.
Okay, I came to talk to you guys a couple of weeks ago. I was talking about Mount Pleasant Police
Can you
Practice.
state your name
Cynthia
and-
Kilmer, 219 North Lansing Street.
Thank you.
I sat on the city commission for about, I'd say 9 years, and it was a really good experience for me. I learned a lot.
Right here.
What's that?
Some of it was right here.
Yes, although back then the mayor sat in the middle,
Okay.
next to the city manager who sat at the dais.
Yes.
Yeah, it was different then.
Okay.
And, yeah, anyway, I came to talk about I was going to share some experiences with Mount Pleasant Police Department over the years. And today I came prepared to talk about an incident. This happened a few years back, and the current public safety director, who I like quite a bit, he was not the public safety director at the time, just to tell you, it was a while ago. So one evening, I was sitting at home, quiet evening, and I got a phone call from a woman whose real name I won't use. I will call her Becky Brown. So Becky Brown called me up saying, I'm a little nervous, I'm gonna call the police, will you come to my place and stay with me while I do that? And I said, sure, I'll be there in a few minutes. So I got in my car and I drove south a little bit. Becky Brown was a CMU student, and she grew up in Mount Pleasant. She was a pretty good kid, never gotten too much trouble. You know, she might have smoked cigarettes once or twice at school or, you know, whatever, but she was a pretty cool kid. And when she got admitted to CMU, she had a couple of big dogs, and she didn't want to live in the dorms, and she didn't want to move from apartment to apartment and deal with the dogs. So she bought a trailer. Her parents bought it for her. And she lived in that trailer park that's a little bit south of CMU. I don't recall the name of it. It's changed names 3 or 4 times since that time. I'm short, and this is like, I'm standing on my tippy toes. Let me adjust that. So she lived in this trailer park a little bit south of town. So I drive down to Becky Brown's house, and she picks up the phone and calls the police. And she called the police. Actually, she called right before I got there, but when I got there, I waited a few minutes. She had already called. The police got there, so I didn't hear what she said at the original phone call. But I was there when they got there. And the police, she told the police that a man who lived near her in the same trailer park had some unwanted interest in her. And that he had come over and sort of pushed himself on her, and he had pushed her down on the couch and done some sexual advances, something that would certainly under the law be called, a sexual assault. And then she managed to push and shove and whatever, get out from under him, push him away, and he went away. And then a couple of days later, his girlfriend came over to the trailer, and she had been beaten up by this guy. I'll just call him Mr. Bad Guy. So the girlfriend of Mr. Bad Guy said to Becky Brown, he stole a bunch of coins from you. And she's like, what do you mean? And yeah, you had this box of coins. So she checked her room, and sure enough, the coins were gone. So she told the police all of this about the assault and the coins being missing. And I was there when the police came. 2 police officers came in the same car. I'm not sure, I think it was a man and a woman. That was a few years ago. And they started asking her all these questions about the coins. And what kind of coins were there, the dates of the coins, the values of the coins, had she gotten them from? Did she have receipts for the coins? Did the address of the Mr. Bad Guy, and, various things like that. And they're taking all these notes down all about the coins. And they say, okay, well, we'll get back to you. We're going to go talk to Mr. Bad Guy and see if he's got your coins and whatever. So they leave. And she starts crying. And she looks at her boyfriend, who was in the room, and said, see, I told you they didn't care about the sex part. And I went, oh. And I jumped up and I ran outside, and I actually got in front of these police officers. I said, wait, stop. I said, didn't you hear the complaint about sexual assault? And they kind of looked at each other and, they said, did she want to talk about sexual assault? And I said, well, she already did talk about sexual assault. She already told you about that. And they kind of begrudgingly re-entered her trailer where she repeated the same exact story. And they listened to her again as though it was the first time she told it. And they said, you know what you ought to do, they said, is you ought to go down to the courthouse and fill out a PPO. And you can pick it up at the clerk's desk, and you fill out what happened, and you turn it in, and you get an order from the judge that says that he can't come back in here ever again. And Becky's like, oh, yeah, okay, I can do that, and then they left. Well, the problem with all of this is a PPO is like a court order saying, don't go in her house again, which is signed by a judge. It's sort of like a preventative order. You might be doing something bad or have something bad planned, so I'm going to order you right now, don't go in there anymore, okay? When an assault has already occurred, a PPO doesn't address that. The sexual assault is a crime that needs to be reported to the prosecutor and ask for a warrant for an arrest. Because crimes in this country, they're supposed to have some kind of punishment attached to them. A PPO doesn't address punishment. You can shoot somebody and their spouse can get a PPO, stay out of my house. Okay, I'll never go in that house again, because I got a PPO, but I shot the guy, right? So what I'm here today to stress is that, and I'm going to come back numerous times to talk about different issues that pertain to women and public safety. But today my point is a PPO, it doesn't punish a criminal. A PPO does not relieve the police officer from taking the proper steps. It doesn't relieve him from creating a report and turning it into the prosecutor, which is what he is supposed to do. She may not have been able to get a PPO because a PPO has certain requirements. If a guy comes into your house once and does something bad to you, that may not be grounds for a PPO. A PPO has got its own special requirements. So, there always has to be 2 or 3 incidences of various degrees before you get one. A singular instance of wrongdoing or bad doing does not qualify you for a PPO. So it's not the same thing. It shouldn't be treated as the same thing. But I'll tell you what a PPO is good for. It's good for the police not having to fill out the paperwork. Because they can say to you, hey, you know what you ought to do is go get a PPO. Now, all the requirements of documentation, paperwork, filing the report, now all fall back onto you, citizen. And I can walk away saying, I gave them appropriate advice and leave. And that was what happened.
Your time is up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll be back.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
Hello, my name is Margin Notstein. I live at 1361 South Crawford. just a few blocks up from the Cabin Bar, so that southwest corner is of importance to me. I've lived in that house for 40 years, and I've seen subdivisions, and I've seen condos, and I've seen churches. I've seen everything come into our community. And I thought that that particular space was sort of safe because it was going to be developed for housing. And yet, here we have now a possibility of the community church wanting a school. It's not, traffic-wise, not good for a school there. Any left turners will have a problem turning off of that road. There's a school half block up on Crawford. It's ridiculous to need one right there. They can find somewhere else to have their school. I don't know any private school that is cheap, so if you're thinking about cheap schools for cheap houses, that isn't going to happen. I thought actually we were going to get to say something before you voted, but now it's dissolved, that's what it is, terminated, okay? Now you have to think about the rezoning, and I can hardly wait to see what you decide in rezoning, because I'm sure it won't take into account what I want, because every time I've talked here, it's always what you want and not what any of the neighborhood wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
Hello, I'm Joseph Carrion. I live on 109 North Arnold Street. I come to talk about bicycle infrastructure. So I spoke last week at the Planning Commission about the same thing, but this is also probably going to be a ongoing thing where I come up here as I'm just over time just doing more and more research and learning as I go. But as of now, I've currently been able to finish up reading the zoning code as well as the bicycle parking standards and as well as the 2050 master plan. And in my reading, I think it's fantastic. I want to start there, right? Like I truly, the 2050 master plan was one of the reasons I moved to this town in the first place. Yeah, I love where the future of this town is going. But after someone who's lived car-free for 8 months now, I do fear that the implementation of all these bike lanes will be just a fad, where it'll be people loving the new stuff and then eventually realizing that there is terrible, terrible bicycle parking infrastructure in this town. And they're going to go right back to their car. I know that currently there's a grandfather rule in terms of bicycle parking for all the current businesses that were here before 2018. I do think that we should be looking at, as soon as possible, setting a deadline to when bicycle parking should be in, because the sooner you guys decide on that, the more generous you can be on that deadline, which helps businesses all around. The other thing I was looking into now is essentially the bicycle parking standards. And in my reading, I've just been looking at other cities and what they have, what we don't have, kind of things, what can help businesses. Because obviously, I think we can do a lot better with what we have. I'm not saying that what we have is terrible or anything, but we can do better at giving these businesses as much options as possible to implementing bicycle parking. With that being said, I think, because when I go around this town with a bike, I don't think if I was a business owner at some of these establishments that it's even viable to extend the sidewalk. So to only have bicycle parking standards that are for the sidewalk, it kind of limits a lot of businesses here. And not only that, some of these businesses, I feel like if you extend the sidewalk, now you're creating a safety hazard where maybe fire trucks can't enter, right? So the idea is to expand all options. And one of the ideas that I was coming up with was to maybe add 45-degree parking standards, which aren't in. You only have horizontal and vertical bicycle parking. So we would want to include 45-degree parking standards with full dimensions. And the reason for that is those are the best kind of parkings that could maybe replace a car parking slot to turn into bicycle. So if someone doesn't have the space to expand their sidewalk, maybe they can look at just removing one parking spot for a vehicle and implementing 6 bicycle parking, stuff like that. We want to, and something like that is going to be far more cost effective, where a lot of these businesses, when they look at expanding their sidewalk, they not only have to pay for the expansion of the sidewalk, but they also have to pay for the removal of asphalt. So costs can easily add up. So what we want to do is look for those cheaper methods and getting these businesses just the best possible options so they can make their, you know, 'cause I see it from their end. There's a lot of businesses here who probably don't ever think about bicycle parking. At the end of the day, it's just a cost thing to them. Let's look at the cost and let's make it viable for them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? All right, at this time, I will close the public comment. Going to ask the commission, it's 9 o'clock. Do you want to take a recess, or should we just go into the work session?
Recess.
We want to recess? We will take a 5-minute recess. Are we
So
live?
they wanted to make sure it got passed, basically.
All right.
Mindset of an entrepreneur, interesting.
All right, we're going to continue our meeting. You don't want to sit through our work session. I
Climate change, let's go.
would probably ask
We're
that
doing a good
you,
job.
We actually are
Leave.
moving a lot faster than I thought we were gonna be.
we're doing okay. We're going to talk about climate change response
We
plan.
sure are.
I don't know.
So I'm just going to set up here real quick because I want to be able to take notes while we're going through this and
Okay.
everything. So just bear with me for a moment.
Wow, it's just us.
No, there's those guys over there. Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Did we get shut down somehow up here? Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All the grants.
Yeah.
4:11.
Then we have a closed session too.
Yes, then we have a closed session after this.
All right, here we
Wait,
go.
we have a closed session, right?
This isn't closed session.
This is open.
Okay.
We have a closed session.
No
after
one
This
can
is a
know.
work session.
This is open. We got Joe and Bill with us.
Yes.
Of course it's open.
No one can know
This is
about
work-
climate
work
change. It's a
session.
secret.
All right. So welcome, City Commission. I wanted to discuss tonight some goals and objectives related to our climate change preparedness plan. So this is the work session where I want to do that essentially. Our agenda for this evening, I want to talk about, and it's just very briefly in my presentation, just to recall everyone's attention back to some of the work that has been done along the lines of vulnerability. That's both area-wide vulnerability as well as community vulnerability, which we received in the form of a community vulnerability survey, the results of which were presented by our former intern, Mason Skulitz Peterson. So that presentation was about a month ago. I didn't want to get too far outside of that presentation, so hopefully some of that information is still fresh in our minds. I want to talk about the Michigan Green Communities program. I think it serves as a good framework for starting to engage in some of our climate change and climate preparedness type work. So I want to talk about that. In relation to it, I want to go and talk about some of the current and historic Mount Pleasant initiatives. I think as I go through the presentation, you will see that the city of Mount Pleasant has actually done quite a bit on this front, though always more work to be done. From there, I want to talk about probably some low-hanging fruit within the program, things that I think could be probably longer-term goals. But then most importantly, I want to get some feedback from the City Commission. Does this seem to make sense for everyone? Should we sign on to these kind of goals? Are there other goals that we should add, goals we should omit, et cetera? And so at that point, I'm going to turn it over to the City Commission for further input. So starting out, again, just wanted to talk about vulnerabilities that will be part of the report on our climate change preparedness plan. And in particular, that's area-wide vulnerabilities. Now, this was subject of some classwork that was done from Central Michigan University, where they had pointed out within Michigan, you have things from climate change like extreme heat, extreme drought, storms, flooding, and the issues with vulnerable populations, things that we need to be concerned about. Community concerns, which was given to us in the form of survey data from Mason, we have both primary and secondary impacts. Folks are more concerned, it seemed, from the input from the survey about some of the secondary impacts. So therefore, things like the cost of what utilities might do should we have climate impacts that, let's say, make water very scarce in the area, or those kind of things. Most respondents in the survey also indicated that they have air conditioning and homeowners insurance, which shows levels of resilience within the community, and that's why those questions were asked. Also, most respondents feel that local government must play a role in addressing climate change, and so I think that's really what we're here today, is to do just that. Very quickly, the Michigan Green Communities program is a statewide network of local government staff and officials that collaborate with one another. There are a number of different organizations that have partnered in developing what Michigan Green Communities is today. That includes the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, the Michigan Municipal League, and a number of other people within the sustainability realm across the state. They came together and they said, here's a number of different things that communities are doing or could consider doing that could impact climate change. And really, they've tried to develop a number of what they would, probably talk about as best practices within this space, things that we could consider doing again, that other communities are doing or that are best practices. It includes several different categories, each of which is comprised of several action items. And so the presentation gears itself around those different categories and some of the action items. There's also recognition awards. You can track your sustainability progress through their online portal. You can update let's say the city's current standing in that we maybe formally met 10 different things, and now after another year, we add another 10 to that list. That can move you further up the chain. And they do some nice recognition and annual awards conference in which communities are presented with a bronze certification, a silver certification, or a gold certification based on the amount of work that the community is able to do. So current and historic Mount Pleasant initiatives, and I'm just going to go through this in fairly rapid succession and just touch on these things. But if you have any questions on some of these particular initiatives, feel free to ask as we go through. One of the areas in climate resilience and adaptation, perform a climate vulnerability assessment that considers health and equity impacts and develop a climate adaptation and resiliency plan in collaboration with the community. We're working on that right now, and that's something that I plan to have delivered to the City Commission by the end of the year here. Develop a hazard mitigation plan with climate projections included. That's something that I still want to work on as part of this plan. Implement hazard mitigation projects to address identified risks in the hazard mitigation plan. Example, flood mitigation, tree planting, heat reduction. These are things that we are looking at in the community. Obviously, flood mitigation is a big one that we take very seriously here with the new storm sewer ordinance, and we'll even get some credit for that in another category later in the presentation. But that's something that we have implemented, as well as tree planting is something that our Public Works Department does on an annual basis. Energy efficiency and renewable energy, conduct energy audits on municipal facilities. We have done this, though I think it would be something that I would encourage we maybe consider as a goal in years future, because the last time we had done this was pre-pandemic. Implement a public financing or grant program to support community energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. We are part of the PACE program, so we do offer the benefits of that program. Ensure equitable access to any and all energy efficiency and renewable energy financing and grant programs. And again, I think that's our plug-in with the PACE program on allowing us to achieve that standard as well too. Energy efficiency and renewable energy continued. Implement at least one renewable energy project. So we have been working over at the Water Resource Recovery Facility on improving that system, which also includes the digesters over there. And there is also a little bit of methane gas as well too that we utilize from that facility for energy needs. So I think that's something that we would also get credit for. And especially as we talk about trying to improve that system going forward, I think we would get credit for it as well. Create an inventory of municipal-owned street lighting. We currently have that. Responsibly managing materials, provide access to information about community recycling programs through the municipal website, local media, social media, and other outreach mechanisms. We do this for our current system, but as we are certainly transitioning to a new system as of January 1, 2025, this is something that will be rolling out very soon. Create an inventory of municipal-owned street lighting, completed. Responsibly managing materials. For communities over 5,000 people, provide on-site organics collection for single-family residents and collection at drop-off sites. Now, this is something that we are talking about internally as we do the developments at our Water Resource Recovery Facility. We've talked about our capabilities of taking in food waste, so this is something that's still in the research and development phase. Sustainable land use and economic development, incorporate smart growth principles in community planning policies and zoning ordinances. We have a very forward-thinking zoning ordinance that does just this. Audit zoning, subdivision, and related development codes to remove barriers to sustainable land use, such as barriers to increased density. Our zoning ordinance does encourage density in virtually all of the different zoning areas. Adopt zoning ordinances that allow for infill housing development. That is allowed in our zoning ordinance. Update ordinances to include specific sustainability measures such as natural features protection, wetlands preservation, green building practices, or other resource protections. Now, it just depends what you're developing and where you're developing, but there are required green spaces, required areas for storm sewer runoff, those kind of things. So that is considered in the city's zoning ordinance. Participate in the MEDC Redevelopment Ready Community Program. Well, hey, we just got recertification. We're good for another 5 years. I don't know if they'll let us check off each year for the next 5 years, but I'm certainly going to try. Adopt a policy for the municipal purchase of local goods and services as practical. as practicable. Our purchase policy does have a section in there related to the purchase of local goods and services, so that is covered in our purchase policy. Allow for farmers markets or other farm-to-pantry food bank programs to enhance access to local food sources. And we have a very, very well-attended farmers market, both Thursdays and Saturdays. Improving health outcomes. Evaluate municipal facilities for potential health risks, such as lead exposure, indoor air quality, mold, or other potential contaminant exposures. Now, I know that this is something that has been done in the past. I would have to review with staff the frequency that we do this, but I think it's safe to say that we should consider doing something in future years as well, too. Implement a neighborhood tree canopy program to improve air quality and reduce heat impacts. I know this is something that's very popular within our neighborhoods, is our tree planting program that the Public Works Department heads up. So that's something we'll want to continue to keep doing in the future. Protecting and conserving water resources. Adopt an asset management plan for municipal water systems, which is already folded into our 6-year capital improvement plan. And adopt a stormwater ordinance to properly manage stormwater runoff. We've completed this as well, too. Support clean and inclusive mobility. Adopt a non-motorized transportation plan that includes a complete streets policy or ordinance. We do have a complete streets policy or ordinance. Install universally accessible public EV charging infrastructure in convenient locations. Once our friends at Consumers Energy are able to turn the power on, we'll be able to check this one off the box. Of course, I know there's going to be further interest in other EV charging stations throughout the city, and we'll have more conversations on that. If you recall, the approval of these EV chargers was more or less a method to dip our toe in the water to see how popular these things are, and certainly from there we'll be able to make more informed decisions on where we might have EV chargers in the future. So these are in process or simple goals, things again that I think we're currently working on or things that would be relatively easy to achieve related to the Michigan Green Communities program. Develop a climate adaptation and resiliency plan in collaboration with the community. That's something we're working on, but in particular, establish baseline metrics for the Michigan Green Communities Challenge, somewhat completed in this presentation. It would have to be within their format, but we could deliver that. And another thing that they talk about as well, too, is greenhouse gas inventory that we'll get into as well. And I think that would be worth some of our time. Update capital improvement plan or asset management plan to include current or future municipal renewable energy projects. I think this is something that we could start to plan for in the future, as there's a lot of interest in the community, and I know there's a lot of interest amongst the city commission as well. Work with local utility providers to ensure that energy and water bills include household energy and water use statistics over time. Now, this is something that we're actually working towards as we onboard satellite reading systems. Those systems are hooked up to web pages that one can go to. So if you currently have one, and some folks within the city do, you could go and you can see water usage relatively quickly reported, and then you can also see historical reports on that website as well too. As we move toward a citywide implementation, ideally this is something then that everyone within the city has access to. Develop a plan to replace municipal traffic signal, street lighting, and or parking illumination with energy efficient lighting technologies. So this is something we'll have to check our inventory to see how much of these are energy efficient versus how many of them need to be replaced. Collect traditional recycling materials from single-family homes. For communities over 5,000 people, provide or allow single hauler curbside collection of traditional materials. Recycling programs should be opt-out. This is something that we have set up and would be implemented January 1, 2025. Provide and or require collection of traditional recycling materials at all multifamily housing, commercial properties, and public spaces and parks as applicable. And I think this is something we would have to break down as to where we want to target. There's certainly a lot of multifamily housing out there that does have recycling, but there's a lot that does not. Is this something that we can work with them to offer? I think we'd have to work on a plan for that. But still, I think probably worth the effort. Incorporate non-motorized transportation elements into new municipal infrastructure projects as relevant. Assess needs and develop a plan for deployment of public electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We touched on this. And provide and or require collection of traditional recycling materials at all multifamily housing, commercial properties, and public spaces, parks as applicable. I read that off in the last slide, and I realize it's secondly on this slide as well. I wanted to underline the importance of this one. Recycling should be available for all individuals. climate resilience and adaptation, and this gets into longer term or achievable goals, develop a municipal operations greenhouse gas inventory. I think it would be interested to see what kind of an impact do some of these things have, and I think that's a good standard for measurement, to measure greenhouse gases, especially as it relates at least to municipal operations, where we can more easily measure that, and then see after a number of different changes, what impact that has had on our greenhouse gases. Track energy use for all municipal buildings using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. This is something that our building official has had on his to-do list for a very long time, and I think you'd be very happy to see something like this come to fruition. Implement at least one renewable energy project on public buildings property in the last year. And I think, again, this is something that we can start to build into the capital improvements plan should we be very interested in something like that. Upgrade, retrofit at least one municipal building in the last year to increase energy efficiency. Audit the inventory and energy intensity of the municipal vehicle fleet and set a decarbonization target for the fleet. Again, coming back to, and this would probably be a very big one, obviously, in measuring greenhouse gases that the city's fleet puts out, and then trying to set a decarbonization target for it, I think would be very interesting. Improve municipal water and wastewater treatment plant efficiency. This is something we're working at the WRF already, and we do have plans to move forward with this at the water treatment plant as well. So all of that said, I know I've thrown a lot at the City Commission. Really what I want to know is, does the City Commission support the above initiatives of Michigan Green Communities? Is this something that we want to get behind? Do we see maybe where that program is lacking in some ways? Are there additional goals that we want to consider? Is there anything that I offered to the City Commission that we're not particularly interested in, or maybe we should divert our attention or priority elsewhere? So this is the time I want to hand it over to the City Commission and just get some feedback and work from there.
I had heard from residents before about getting solar panels on the roof of this building, and then lately I've talked to some people that say, but wait, that's a historic building, we shouldn't mess with it. So it made me start to think about, what about some of our other buildings, if they could maybe utilize solar?
But we did mess with it.
Yeah.
It used to have a chimney and that got taken down, so, I mean, that kind of negates that argument. Why don't we get solar panels?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't alter the
Character.
The
character of the
yeah.
building. I mean, a roof is a roof, you know?
Exactly, that's, I said almost the same thing, we did mess with it. There's nothing
There
that.
we go.
Well, I mean, nothing prohibits us from, again, I'm committed to looking forward, making things more efficient and, you know, being responsible, so.
Kind of trying to coalesce the conversation around it. The goal in my green communities is to commit to doing like a capital project that involves like energy, like a new energy project. How would we go about determining that? Do you think, as city manager, like, hey, we want, like, the city commission determined that we want to see like a just a visible clean energy project within the city? How would you like think about presenting options to us as far as like things that we could do? Because like, yes, putting solar panels on the roof of this building or over parking lots, geothermal or anything like that. Again, how your thoughts on determining that?
I think that would be best left to the experts, to be honest with you. And actually, as there's already been some conversation for a little while now about the potential for solar on City Hall, I had set out to try to find someone who would give us an honest opinion. Obviously, I think if you go to someone who sells solar panels, they're going to tell you how great they are and how energy efficient and the return on investment, but they have a stake in the game. What I had set out to do was to try to find a firm that doesn't sell solar panels, but will give you an honest opinion on the actual return on investment on this. And I was actually able to find it through our friends at Michigan Green Communities, so I'm pretty happy about that. So to answer that question, what I would want to do, if there is interest in that sort of thing, but we don't really know what that is that solar panels here, another building, et cetera, I think we want to bring in an expert to really give us a very honest opinion of here are what your options are, here's what makes sense, here's what a return on investment of each of these prescribed actions is, and then that way the city commission has the best information to make that decision.
Maybe we'll be able to go to a session at conference.
I think so.
Do you think
Have something coming up?
do do you think it'd be possible as like part of the plan that we could like create kind of like a catalog of potential ideas of like, I mean, like, and then like as we're seek to like actually act upon any, we could like, okay, like, well, solar panels right now are at this efficiency, so would it make sense to do this, like this idea now, or do we wait 10 years and everything for when solar panels are a higher efficiency? But just having like a list of like, hey, over the years, these are all the different ideas. Because I mean, I've mentioned to you about like, hey, what if we had a run of water hydro dam in Mill Pond Park, for example? Nothing again, like we talked about the efficiency of it, but just a catalog of like, hey, what are the ideas that we could throw out there? Because we need to be looking at all kinds of different things.
I'd say if the city's commission is interested in that, I could certainly reach out to the firm and see if they're capable of doing that, giving
Well,
us a
not that
catalog.
specific one, but the catalog.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
talking
no,
about.
that's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
I'm interested in that. I want to talk, say something. So I'm interested in that. In fact, I was going to propose that. I realized that we have, the students had done a study, but what I was going to propose is that we get somebody who has very specific expert in this area to do a very focused study for us. You have delineated long-term achievable goals, short-term achievable goals. Some of the things we're talking about in terms of either creating a document or creating a catalog, you've already addressed here. But I think we want to drill this down a little bit more, so that, we have somebody who understands these particular issues, then can take a look at what you have actually here, what you have here, distill it down and say to us, listen, these are the things that are urgent for you, that you need to do right now. These are the urgencies. These are the things that maybe you can wait and do later on. Because we can't take on all of this. I like what you have done, but I want to drill down a little bit more, distill it down so that, because again, this involves money, right? Okay, so we're going to implement some of these things. How much would it cost us? What are we looking at? What must we do? At least let's start somehow. Should we change all our city lights? I do know that in some places, some cities, I'm not going to mention them, but I have some favorite cities where they're changing their city lights, right? They're using solar powered, panels on those city lights, to make them more efficient. I mean, better insulation. How much is it costing us to heat this place up each year?
It's higher than 11 feet.
Okay, see how huge it is? It's very elegant, but look at this. I mean, to keep it heated and all that. So what can we do to make it even more efficient? How much energy are we using to keep it cool, when it's hot? All those things.
I couldn't find the slide, but I wanted to talk about transportation. I think it's important that we talk about not just non-motorized transportation, but also public transit. I think we're going to be dealing with gas-powered cars for a long time, and also if we can have 40 people on a bus versus 40 different EVs, that's still a net positive there and everything. So I think I would like to see, as part of the transportation initiatives that are included in this, work with some kind of effort for public transportation promotion or just better incorporation within the city limits. I know from discussing with the head of ICTC, Rick Collins, that there was a outreach this year about potential for a $200,000 grant that they wanted to partner with the city on, and they didn't get connection back, and it kind of just got left on the table and expired. I'll talk with you more about it and everything, but just a greater emphasis on public transportation I think would be beneficial for our residents who don't have cars, who have to hike across the city from the north end down to McDonald's to work there, or a teacher and everything, again, who lives on the north end of the city, who's going to work in this new school that we're developing, of having, again, more like a variety of things, not just EVs, which not everyone can afford, and not just biking and everything, but also busing would be an important step there.
for it.
I think I misheard my commissioner friend here. I don't think we are developing the new school. We're not developing, it's not us. We're changing the zone so that they can.
No, I know we're not,
Okay,
we're not developing it.
Yeah, so I think you said something about the new school
Oh,
we're
yeah,
developing.
there's-
Like,
well, there's gonna be
we're
a new
not doing that. Just to clarify.
No, I know that.
Okay,
We didn't
okay.
say we were developing the school.
I made comments that we're now
That there's-
developing
that
everything.
We
Yeah.
now have a new school in development.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we're not, okay.
We're not.
So no. So, what I'm thinking of here is, in fact, about a week or two ago, I was listening to NPR and they were talking about Michigan green communities. I mean, it's a hot topic, right? And in this case, it is what communities are doing themselves to make themselves green. So that's something that, apart from what the city commission can do, what are the things that we can help, communities, people in our communities, engage in? We do have this, the community garden. Oh, by the way, we need to come back to that. Community garden and orchard. But what are other places? We've been talking about green spaces in our city. So what, how can we do that? How can we encourage, residents themselves to engage so that it's not just always the city commission? I like collaborative work. I think the danger is to make sure that this is not always hierarchical, where it is, we wait for the city to do it and tell us to do it. We want people to be involved. This is community.
Didn't we set up like a zone where people could get funding or get help from PACE for
Yes.
solar?
Yeah, commercial or.
Or
even,
And I think that
residents.
modeling good behavior is always a good thing.
Exactly, or even just resident,
one of their pages
it doesn't
in
always have to be commercial. What about private entities? People who want to, sort of make their homes environmentally sustainable.
Commissioner Eke, our third to last page of this 448-page
know.
agenda today, it says inspire and mobilize residents. So
Yes,
just
yes,
what you're
yes, yes,
talking
That's
about.
what I'm talking about, yes. I just want to foreground that it doesn't always have to be hierarchical.
Go ahead, Liz.
I do want to kind of tie onto that just a little bit, because I do think it's worth stating, and it sounds like, I guess maybe it is in a way, but that I think that part of the, the goal should be to provide resources, and the city already does a very good job with communication on projects and whatnot, so whatever changes we do end up incorporating, I just think like clear transparency in terms of why we're doing all these things, recommendations for people can do to be a little bit of a resource for actions people might take, or just an awareness is just to have.
Okay.
Seems to me as that we support what you're doing, where you're going with this.
It makes my job much, much easier. Thank you very much.
Just something I'd want to clarify, mechanism for revisiting things. So we'll be probably having this completed, it sounds like end of the year or in 2020, early 2025 of like having like the plan itself completed. But I would want to, I don't know, I didn't get a chance to like read all of it and everything, but I would like to make sure that there is an opportunity to, in there that like pushes us to revisit the plan periodically. So either every year or every 2 years and everything to like either check off what we're doing, but just a mechanism in there that triggers that. And it's not just something that gets left to the wayside. That would be an important aspect for me.
It's always good to go back and see what we've done and if we need to improve or if there are things we need to change. Always. All right. You got it?
All right, I got it. Thank you very
Okay.
much, everyone.
You're welcome.
All right, at this time.
Good job.
I am going to put forward a motion to go into a closed session pursuant to subsection 8C of the Open Meetings Act for strategy and negotiation sessions connected with the negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement. Is there a second?
I
Second.
All right,
Just pick one.
just pick one. All right, all those, do I have to roll call?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Eke,
Yes?
Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Wingard,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alsteiger,
Yes.
Mayor Perschbacher.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, we have a motion to go into closed session. I will give us a 5-minute recess to clear the auditorium.
Okay.
Have a good night, boys.
Yep.
Bye.
See you later.